I have no idea why. I'm baffled. I've sat on the sidelines, and Mahershala Ali's an amazing actor. I don't know why.
A lot there unpacked, and I love that. I love that he said that, because it shouldn't be that complicated. I think a lot of us could see that. But then he dropped that little nugget of thing of like saying that Christopher Nolan said, "Yeah, don't work on the new Batman." Now let's talk about David Goyer a little bit. David Goyer has seen the Superman trailers, and he's loved the Superman trailers. And he said, yes, it's nothing like Man of Steel, which of course he was a writer on. And he goes, yeah, I would have never considered using crypto, which, yes, can you imagine in that universe a flying dog with a cape? No, you can't imagine that. You know, everybody always says like, well, Zack Snyder's Crypto would have a machine gun, which, you know, it's a funny joke. When he sees Crypto in those trailers, he has like a big smile on his face. So it's like, oh yeah, cool, David Goyer. And then naturally there's obviously some of the loud side of the fandom, which of course is like, David Goyer, how dare you say that? But let's kind of go through some of this, on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast.
Alluded to this a little bit. I want to give folks that weren't maybe around or aware at the time a little context of where everybody was at the time. So Chris, sure. You mentioned, right, has Memento. He's just coming off of Insomnia, which is kind of his first big studio film. Does fine, but then he's given the keys to Batman. We're a few years removed from Batman and Robin, which kind of like over-indexed on kind of the pop
goofy
art.
Adam West Batman.
Right.
Yep.
You're in
He's
the throes
100%
of your
correct
Blade
on that
trilogy. I think you're about to go off and direct actually Blade Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
And the comic book movie world is in an interesting spot. The Spider-Man movies are going, so those are successful, but we're pre-MCU.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of, like, say, with all that context. So Chris comes to you, and we talked about this a little bit on our last conversation, but give me a little more info on, like, your reaction when he comes to you, what those initial conversations were, and what you thought of what he said to you when he brought this up.
Well, yeah, 8 years prior had been the last Batman film, Batman and Robin, which was, fairly or not, the most kind of maligned of those four films. And there was a perception, well, even when Tim Burton's Batman came out, that was darker and more serious than people had expected. But then the movies progressively got closer and closer and closer to the Adam West version, which was the public's general perception of what Batman was.
Right.
And in the intervening years, it just so happened that I happened to be personal friends with a lot of the people who had attempted to make the next Batman movie. I was friends, I still am friends with these people, but I was friends with Mark Protasevich, who'd written a fifth Batman movie that was supposed to be the next Schumacher film. Right. And we had talked about that.
Oh, I remember that one.
Friends with Boaz Yakin.
It's supposed to have Scarecrow and Harley Quinn.
I think a Batman Beyond script. And I was friends
Beyond script.
with Andrew Kevin Walker, who had written a Batman Superman. And so I was kind of sitting on the sidelines every once in a while, having a meal with these guys, hearing about these next Batman films that had all stalled. And I think at one point there was even an attempt to do an R-rated Aronofsky in year one.
Yep, there's that one too. That was going to have Joaquin Phoenix.
I was just
starring,
sitting here and kind of on the sidelines watching all these Batman movies get developed and then, fall into development hell. And I just had assumed, I'd heard that Chris might be developing a new Batman movie, and I remember telling my agent, well, it's never going to get made. It's just right. It's just
brilliant writers. These are like no slouches. The people you're talking about are like A-list writers.
None of those guys could get it made, and these other filmmakers, and it's just sort of mired in all this stuff.
Yeah.
And but the thing that and the irony too is that it appears that Batman was a consolation prize for Chris rather, that because he'd been developing Troy, and then at some point Troy was shifted away and given to
Wolfgang.
I think it was Wolfgang
Peterson. Yeah,
and
who was also making a Batman
and I think
Superman
Wolfgang Peterson had been developing Batman Superman.
Yeah.
So I think they did a swap. And that was meant to be the consolation prize, I guess. And Chris
Crazy.
was not Chris Nolan at the time, so
Yeah.
I thought he was immensely talented, and I knew him a bit socially, but I didn't think it would be successful or it would get off the ground. And the thing that I hadn't counted on was the sort of the pressure within Warner Brothers to get a new one going finally. And that B, the acknowledgement, and this is a rare opportunity when this happens within Hollywood and Warner Brothers, that Batman was broken. that something
Bane,
drastic
you damn it.
had to
Bane
be
did it.
done, something different. And so it was sort of like the right time, the right place, because when we came in, what we were pitching was the exact opposite of Batman and Robin.
Rounded
But
as
the
opposed
conditions
to,
were
Yep.
right
Yep.
for Warner Brothers to be open to that at the time.
Yep.
And when Chris first approached me, I said I was too busy, and secretly I didn't think it would get off the ground. And I remember I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and we had a long conversation, an hour and a half. He said, well, hypothetically, and I spitballed a lot of ideas, and I think I mentioned the Scarecrow and Raj al Ghul, and I was, in particular, I really wanted, I just thought that one should use some villains that hadn't been used before to also signal to the
Yes,
world.
no Joker, as in no
that we were
Joker.
doing something different. And so I remember going down the list of villains for Chris that I thought were still sort of tier A villains, but that hadn't been used, and the ones that were interesting and whatnot. And I said,
That took Catwoman and Joker off the table because they were just they've been mined so well.
Two-Face, all of them, because I just said we have to do something different.
Yeah.
And then I said, but I don't want to do it. And so incredibly, this kid who had dreamed of doing all this stuff, I passed on it. What was it? And then, I don't know, it feels like 3 or 4 weeks later, Chris talked to some other people. Then he called back and he said, I've talked to some other people, and I really feel it should be you working with me on this. And I was, really flattered, and we ended up working on it together. He already wanted to do an origin story, and we were both intrigued with everyone had seen versions of, like, Joe Chill killing the parents and then the bat crashing through the window. But no one had seen, well, how did he get all those skills? And even Frank Miller's
That's
Year
why
One
it's so great.
starts with him returning to Gotham City, having been away for a year or two.
Yes.
And it doesn't really talk about what happened during that period of time. So the other thing that's really interesting when you're adapting something that's very well known, whether it be a comic book or a novel, is narrative gaps.
Yes.
Are really enticing, because that a narrative gap is an opportunity.
Yep.
To do something really interesting.
There you go. So you have that. And then we got this right here. The controversial that always shows up like every 7 weeks on the timeline, Batman killing.
Controversy. Was there a big debate about whether, how responsible he should be? Does Batman kill? Does he let him die? What that kind of discussion was for Ra's al Ghul on that train?
Yeah, I remember that, Chris and I had gone to New York for a few days and met with the editorial board of DC Comics, and we outlined our plans and said, in your opinion, what are the kind of stations of the cross that we should hit for a good Batman story, and what are the things that we really should not do? And one of them was have him use a gun, and I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure one of them was that he shouldn't directly kill someone out of revenge.
Directly.
And I don't remember whether or not, forgive me, this was 23 years ago, that was also a concern on Warner Brothers' part, but it felt like that was the way we arrived at that was kind of like the right massaging morally of how to do it.
I won't kill you, but I won't
To be
have
continued
to
on Man of Steel, which would become a whole other thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So the final...
Man of freaking Steel. And then we're going to jump to Blade because, the first Blade movie was written by David S. Goyer, which is a great Blade movie. It's a classic, iconic Blade movie. So, like, what the fuck is going on with the MCU Blade movie?
Talked about Blade recently. Like, what were you at?
I'm pretty much still not into comic book Blades. I mean,
That's good. You did a lot. It's okay. Do original
I'm
shit.
an executive producer of Murderbot, which is out right now, and Foundation coming back on July 11th, and Sandman, which is comic book, coming out July 3rd. But I think that's probably it. I've got a new project that I'll be going to market with next month. It is not comic book. It's still genre, but not comic book. But look, I go back and forth on all the time on social media. I see, they should have Goyer do the new Blade. They should have Goyer do the Blade. Part of me thinks it would be fun, but part of me thinks I did so far the definitive Blade, and it's a mistake. I don't remember Chris advising me not to work on the Affleck Batman, just because it's like it's confusing. We did one. Just stick with that.
Yeah.
Chris told him not to work on Batfleck? Uh-oh.
I mean, we were talking about Blade a couple years back. This is like the most plagued, like, this is so, well, I don't know why they can't crack this. This is insane.
I don't either, because in my mind, I think Blade is a relatively simple story. It's not complicated.
No.
And I always think about when you embark on a movie like this, you have to distill down what is the promise of the movie, right? So the promise of Blade, a new Blade, is that it should have insane ass kicking. It should be pretty scary, might be R-rated, and it doesn't have to be. It should not be complicated.
No,
it should be a simple story. So I don't know why it's been so hard. I have no idea why. I'm baffled. I've sat on the sidelines, and Mahershala Ali's an amazing actor. I don't know why.
I mean, kudos to him for sticking through all these different iterations. He's obviously devoted to this character. He wants to make it work. But I almost wonder if, like, Wesley stopped showing up and being such a crowd pleaser, and Deadpool Wolverine almost complicated it. They're like, wait a second, they still love Wesley. What do we?
And I thought that was cool too. But it's confusing. Also, if you're trying to do another one, it may have been just an acknowledgement that, we can't crack it right now. I have no idea. I haven't been involved in the conversations.
All good.
A lot there unpacked, and I love that. I love that he said that, because it shouldn't be that complicated. I think a lot of us could see that. But then he dropped that little nugget of thing of, like, saying that Christopher Nolan said, don't work on the new Batman. You already worked on one. That's gonna get confusing. And that's not Christopher Nolan just being like, no. I actually understand what he was actually talking about. I think, in a sense of the fact that when you see Batman, even though it kind of doesn't make sense, but I guess it makes sense if you're thinking like how the mastermind that is Christopher Nolan, and being like, no, we can't sell that. You were very much there. Your name is there when it comes to Batman Begins and Dark Knight and the whole trilogy right there.